Hello everybody, it's Mr. Poppleton here from Pocatello, Idaho, and today I'm going to be going over World Conquerors. This is a 2 to 4 player game that is a territory control game, okay? It is not Risk though. For a few different ways it's not like Risk. First of all, the cards are totally different up here, and we'll get into those in a minute. And the territories can only have one army on them. You can never get more than one army on each territory. Okay? That's another thing. So they're almost more like control markers than they are armies. There's also generals and rulers and different actions you can play. And we're going to get into all that today so you know how to play World Conquerors and have a general idea if it's a game that you would like to play. Okay, so the board, it is small, but it is not easy to take. Okay, there may only be 5 territories here in Asia, but it is not an easy task. So let's look at the bottom of the board here. We got a few different markers here at the bottom. So the first one we're going to go over is the turn. It's easy. There's 4 turns in the game. On the last player's 4th turn, the game is ended. Okay. The supply cost is the payment you have to do for every attack you fail or for sea attacks you conduct. Okay. So if you fail an attack, you would have to pay 1. If you fail a second attack, you would have to pay 2. A third attack, you would have to pay 3, and so on. At the start of every player's turn, this will always be reset back to 1. Finally, we have the Empire mark and bonus mark here at the bottom. So the Empire mark, we'll go into that first. You will place everyone's token, or one of their armies, at the number 1 mark. Every time a territory is taken, you will move the player's mark up the Empire mark. When territories are lost, you do not move the Empire mark. So it will always stay at the most that a player has had. So if a player gains 7 and then loses 2 to red, red would take 2, but blue would not go down. So that's how those work. The next is the bonus mark. The bonus mark will start at 4 every game. The bonus mark says how many men you get at the first of your turn and how many men you get for completing objectives. This will go up every turn. Player 1 will receive 4 men, player 2 5, player 3 6, and in a 3-player game, player 1 would get 7 on his following turn. And this will go up throughout the 4 turns. That is the board in a nutshell. So, the setup. So to start out, every player gets 6 cubes. These represent their armies. So we will be showing most of our examples today with the red and blue player. We will occasionally bring in green when needed. But we'll just pull these 2 up here right now. Okay? Along with that, you will give 3 cards to each player. So what are those cards? Well, they're leaders. Okay, and I'll show you some of these leaders. Now, they're leaders from all eras of history, and you'll be using them in the game at the same time. And it's not historical in that sense, but all these leaders are historically significant. So I'm going to show you a few here. So we got Richard Lionheart, and he's in Britain. Adolf Hitler in East Europe. Ramses II in North Africa. George Washington in the United States. And so on. So these cards all have different abilities, okay, and can be used in different ways. So let's get into that a little bit. So you can use a card in 3 different ways. The first way you can play it is using the A symbol here. The rulebook says agent, but it's easier to remember it as an action. So you can play any of your cards if this was your hand. You can play an action. So for Richard Lionheart's action, you could discard his card, and then you may reset your supply cost to 3. Meaning, if you had been attacking and losing a lot, and now you need to pay 5 if you lose your next, you can reset this to 3. Okay? So that would be to discard Richard Lionheart. That would be the benefit you would get from him. Adolf Hitler, you can add a die to this attack. Okay, so that's how those are used with the A, agent action. Next is the ruler action. Excuse me, I'm off camera here. So the ruler action is usually a little bit better, and you will place a ruler token on the board. And this is where you will start that turn. Okay, we'll get into that. But the ruler also has a special ability. You have to start the ruler in its home country, unless it says otherwise. And you may reset your supply cost to 1, but you can only do that once. And then the ruler has a goal. If you complete this goal, you will get armies from the bonus mark. So if the bonus mark's at 4, you would get a bonus 4 guys on your turn as soon as you take the Middle East. Okay, so showing Richard Lionheart, if we're using that for the blue player to start out real quick, he would use his large pawn as a ruler starting in Great Britain, getting one of his cubes and putting it there. That would be using the ruler. And then he can attack and stuff and try to get that Middle East goal. So that is using it as a ruler. Another way you can use it is using it as a general. So how do you use it as a general? You don't read any of the card. You discard the card, and then you get a smaller pawn, and you put it on whatever spot this was, so Eastern Europe. But you'd have to control that territory. So blue would have had to control the Eastern Europe, and then you could throw this general here. The generals and the rulers will let you re-roll a die once per attack. So if you were fighting red player in Russia, and you rolled, and red player was going to win, you could put your general on its side to re-roll for this attack only. And as you failed, you'd keep having to pay the supply cost. But once you won the battle in Russia, you may then stand your general back up, and he can do re-rolls for Scandinavia or Middle East now. That's how the generals work. So now let's go over how a turn works. So to start off the blue player's turn, everyone starts with 6, right? And I moved all my guys off the board here. 6. Okay. And then you look at the bonus mark, which player 1 is always going to start at 4. Before he played his ruler, everyone should have drawn a card. So he draws a card, and every other player also would draw a card. From there, you can then play your ruler card and taking one of your guys from your supply and putting it down there. From there, you can start making attacks to adjacent territories. Or you can make an attack from a sea territory to another territory bordering the sea. So, North Africa is bordering the sea and is adjacent to every territory bordering the sea. He can go to Amazon, he can go to Great Britain, and he can go all the way here to Far East. It doesn't matter where it is, as long as it's touching water, like here, you can come out and attack Mexico. It doesn't matter, as long as you're touching water. The only territory that's not touching water is Central Asia. The ocean, I shouldn't say water because there are some lakes in there. Okay, so the beginning of the turn, he got his bonus mark. He played his ruler. And now he can start attacking. Okay, so from here, any adjacent territory, like I said, he can attack. So let's say he's going to attack Russia. So the attacker is automatically going to get 1 die for the one adjacent. And the defender, let's use a different color, will get 1 die automatically if there's no one there. So you would roll, and the attacker 1 with a 4 beating the 2. Whichever higher number it is wins. It's very similar to Risk. Okay, so now he can get from his supply and put a blue token there. He can now choose to attack Mongolia. And then he won again. So he can get from his supply and put it on Mongolia. Now if he wants to attack Central Asia, he has 2 territories bordering Central Asia, meaning he will get a second dice to fight in that battle. So when you're rolling multiple dice, you always drop the lower dice and use the higher of the two, and then compare it to the opponent's dice. So 5 would beat 3, and he would get from his supply and put it on there. If for whatever reason he had lost, defense wins the ties, he would have to pay the supply cost, like I was mentioning earlier, out of his supply. If he was attacking the Far East, let's say he's attacking Far East now, then the supply cost goes up. So if he rolls again for the Far East, we're going to cheat here, he would have to pay the supply cost of 2. And then it goes up to 3. Now he can attack one more time, and we're going to keep cheating here for the example's sake. And he lost again, had to pay a supply cost of 3. And then it goes up to 4. He has no more men in his supply. But even if he did have 1 or 2, he couldn't attack again, because if he lost, he wouldn't be able to pay the supply cost. So if you're ever unable to pay the supply cost, you are forced to end your turn at that point, unless you want to play some actions or something to get you extra supply men. So, did Hitler fulfill his goal? If he did, then you would get the bonus mark, an extra 4. But he did not. So, Hitler stays on the map because you can use him as a reroll. The bonus mark goes up 1. The supply cost goes down to 0. You count the territories, 1, 2, 3, 4. Increase the blue marker to 4, and red would now go. Red would now get 5 for his turn and choose somebody for his starting point. George Washington. So he can start in the United States with 1. In the case that he wanted to start in the United States and a player was already there, such as green in this example I'm doing, he can bump green off, but green automatically gets whatever the bonus mark is at added to his supply. So green would then get 5 armies added to his supply. But it would not penalize the red player. Then the red player would go on attacking.
All right, so I'm going to show you some example battles here. So I'm going to throw some pieces out, zoom in, and we'll go over some stuff.
Okay, so if the blue player has a general, it is the smaller of the two. I actually got a piece from Risk and use a little horseman instead for my general. But for the example of this game, we're just going to use the pawn that comes with it. So for him, if he wanted to attack Indochina, he only has 1 adjacent to Indochina. So the attacker would get 1 dice. The defender has Indochina, and anything adjacent to Indochina, Far East, he would get a die. If Red owned the Middle East, he would get another die, but he does not. They would continually roll. Now because the red got higher, he would win, and blue would have to pay the supply cost. But he can turn his general on his side and re-roll the dice. Sometimes that happens, and he would still have to pay the supply cost of 1. And then it would be bumped up to 2. So that's how that attacking and defending works. So it's however many guys you have adjacent to you. For the case of attacking the Middle East, it will always defend with 2 dice. So if someone owns North Africa and the Middle East, it is connected here. It would roll 2 for the Middle East and 1 for North Africa as the supporting unit if you were attacking there. But if you were the blue player, you could get 1, 2, 3 dice coming in with a potential of 2 rerolls. So winning the game, how do you win the game? Well, let me readjust my camera here. Sorry, I'm on my craft table recording this. At the end of the 4th turn, whoever has had the highest mark on this tracker would win. So in this example here I have here, green player would win. Even though green player on the board only has 2 territories, at one point he had 10 and was the greatest, so he wins. Another way to win is if you own every territory on the board at any point, you automatically win. Even if you can do that turn 1, which I have never seen done. But that is World Conquerors for you. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next week.